Okay then, so we're going to create two tables. We need to create an event table and an attendees table. So to do that, we need to first of all go to all programs, and we need to go to Microsoft Office folder and Microsoft Access. Okay, then when we get into Microsoft Access, because we've not already got an existing database, we need to go to blank database, and we need to save the blank database before we do anything. So we're going to give it an appropriate name. We might call it Events and Attendees. And I'm going to browse first of all where you want it to be saved. It should be saved in your Event Finance folder, Finance and Technology folder, but if you've not got one, just save it into your own user area and click Create. Okay. Now, as you can see, we've got an empty table here that is created for us, and at the moment it's given us one field, the ID field. So we need to modify, we need to change this table to suit us. So we're going to go over to View here on the left hand side, and you click on there. It asks us to save the table. So we're going to do the events table first. So we'll call this event and click OK. So this is the design view. This is where we can modify the table and set validation and all our field names, etc. This isn't the view that we actually input the data into the table. So we've got on primary key, the first field name that it gives us is the ID, and it automatically sets this to be a primary key. So I'm just going to change that and call it event ID to make it a bit more obvious. And we do want the data type to be an auto number, which means that every time we enter a new record, it generates a new number in order, in ascending order, starting from 1. Okay, so we've got event ID. The next field name that we're going to have is event name, and it will automatically set this to be a text field, which is fine. And to add a bit of validation to this, we're going to reduce the field size for the name to be around 35 characters. Okay. The next field name will be event contact. And this will be the person's name, so we'll have that as a text field. And again, we'll just reduce that to about 35 to restrict the users from entering more than 35 characters. The next field will be event venue. And again, we can restrict that. You might even want to have it less than 35. And we're going to have event contact number. Okay. Now we do want the number to be a text field, because if we set it to be a number data type, then it will remove the leading 0, and we do want to keep that. But we can set it to be 11 characters, because numbers are 11, and we can add an input mask on there to say, although it's set to be a text field, we're only going to allow numbers. So to do that, to only allow numbers, we need to have the 0. So we'll have 11 zeros, which means must be a number. So if anybody tries to enter letters into this field, it won't allow it. We could add a validation text onto there. So if the user does try to enter letters, it will come back with an error message. So we can say you can only enter numbers into this field. If you want to make these fields required, by the way, you can set required to yes by clicking on the drop down list. Okay, then the next will be event contact email. And again, we want that to be text, because it's an email address, but we'll reduce the number of characters to maybe 40. 35, 40, something like that. Okay, then we want event start date. And this is a date, so we want to select the data type, which is date time. Okay, now we want it to be a certain type of date when they enter it, so we can select the short date. So it will be entered DDMMYYYY. We can also enter an input mask just to prevent them from trying to enter something else into there. And you can use this little format button at the side, and it asks us to save the table, yes. And then we can actually choose, rather than us typing in the input mask manually, we can just choose short date and click finish. So it enters the short date input mask for us. Event end date will be the next field, and again exactly the same. We want a date and time field. We're going to format that to be a short date, and then on the next line on the input mask I'll go through the wizard to select a short date and click finish. And then the last field name will be event start time. And this again will be a date time field, and we're going to be going for time rather than date, so we can go down to short time, so it enters it in 24-hour clock, and then we can add an input mask to that as well, just to restrict the users even more. Okay, so we've set up our events table. So if we just click the cross, do you want to save changes? Yes. Okay, so here we have our events table, and now if we double click onto it, we have the input view. Okay, if you wanted to go back and make any more changes, just click on the design view, and when you're done, click on the normal view sign at the top so we can start entering the data when we're ready. Okay, now the next table that we're going to create is the attendees. So I'm going to go over to create table. Again, it gives me the normal input view, so I'm going to go up to view and give it attendees. We'll change the primary key to make it more specific, attendees ID. Okay, now the next field will be title, and I want it to be a text field, and I might restrict this to be about 15 characters. I can also now, I'd like to add a drop down list to this to restrict the users even more from entering any type of title, and also preventing any misspellings. So to add a drop down list, I need to go to the lookup tab, and on the display control I want a combo box. I don't want it to be a table query, I want it to be a value list, and I can start adding my different options. So we'll have Mrs, semicolon, Ms, Miss, semicolon, Mr, Sir, Professor, and so on. Okay, now further down here you can see it says limit to list. I want to set that to be yes to prevent a user from overriding the drop down list and just manually typing in anything they want. So if I say yes, I want to limit to list, it means that they can only use the options in the drop down list. Okay, the next field name will be forename. I want that to be a text. If I go back to general, I can reduce this to be 35 characters, adding a little bit of validation. Surname will be the next, and again I'll set that to be about 35 characters. Now we need to enter the user's address. I want this on separate lines, so a separate column for the first line of their address, and the second line, third line, fourth line, and then postcard. So I'm going to call this address 1. And again, I can set that to about 35 characters. Address 2. And again, 35 characters. Address 3. 35 characters. and address for, which will be the county. And I'll select that to 35 characters. Postcode will be the next field name. I want this to be a text field. Postcodes are no more than 8 characters. For example, LS26 5GH. So there'll be 8 characters maximum. I can set an input mask on this to make sure that the user can only enter letters and numbers at certain points. So it would be L for must be a letter, question mark for could be a letter, 0 must be a number, 9 could be a number. Space, postcodes always end with a number, letter, so it would be must be a number, must be a letter, must be a letter. Click off, it puts a / in there, and that's our input mask. The next field will be contact number. That will be a text field just like it was a number in the events table, but numbers are always, phone numbers are always 11 characters, and we can add an input mask for 11 zeros. So that only numbers can be entered into this field. Email will be the next field, and we'll set that to be 35 to 40 characters long. The next field will be paid, and we want to know if they've paid or they haven't paid. So because that's a yes or no response, we can use a yes/no data type, which is basically a tick or an untick. And the next field and last field will be event ID. This is the foreign key, so this field matches the auto number, the primary key in the events table. And because it's a primary key in the other table and it's an auto number, we need to make sure that this foreign key is a number field. And because this is the foreign key from the events table, we need to go to lookup, and this is a combo box. It is a table query. We're looking for the events table. So what we're saying here is we want this event ID to match the event ID in the events table. So select the drop down list and choose the events table. Okay. Now, because we might not know just from the ID what the name of the event is, if we say we want 2 columns to be displayed, it will give us, when we're inputting the data, the actual name of the event, but it will only store the first column, which is the event ID. So if I go to view, say yes, I want to save, I can then start inputting some data. And there you have it, there's the drop down list. When you start to enter some data into these tables, you need to first start entering data into the events table and add some events, and then start adding some attendees. And when you get over, when adding the attendees into the event ID field on the drop down list, here will appear the event ID and the event name from the events table. So you do need to enter event first into the events table. So cross off the 2 tables and now double click onto the events table and start entering at least 5 different events into the events table.